Today I'll show you how to hem your jeans so they don't look homemade. Stay tuned. So I have my jeans and they're a little bit too long. They start to scrunch up when at my ankle when I put my shoes on, and it looks really sloppy. So I want to hem it so it hits my ankle where it's supposed to and it goes over my shoe nicely. So when people hem jeans, you know how this has like a faded look. You want to keep this faded look, and you don't want to just fold it over and hem it because then it looks really homemade. So what we're going to do is detach this part, take off what you need here, and sew it back on so it looks like this. So I already pre-measured and I know I have to take off 2 inches, right? So I'm going to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So that means I'm only going to take off 1.5 inches. I'm only going to cut off 1.5 inches because another half is going to be seam allowance. So now I'm going to turn my jeans inside out so I can mark where it has to be. So we already determined that we have to cut off 1.5 inches. I'm going to use a marker so that you can see it, but usually I would just use chalk so it can wash off. So this is 1.5 inches. I would make sure it's a straight seam and the hems line are touching. The hem line is touching. And make a straight line. So this is 1.5 inches. And then you cut this part off. You can either pin this together so that this doesn't move, or you can just cut it. It depends on how comfortable you are with cutting your jeans. I'm just going to cut it here because it's pretty straightforward. So you do that to both sides of your jeans. I already marked this part, so I'll just cut this, make sure the bottom part is straight, and then you cut. It's 1.5 inches off, or however much you have to hem your jeans. Now, if it's 2 inches, 3 inches, then you take a 2.5 inches off. And so just minus 1/2 of an inch, or however much your seam allowance is going to be. Okay, so you have to keep this part because we're going to reattach it here. So it's going to look like this, and you'll see when we go over to the sewing machine. When you're doing this, just make sure that you keep the same cut piece with the main piece so that you don't mix it up. I mean, if you have to pin one side so that you know this is the one that goes together, that's the best thing to do. So before we go to the sewing machine, you have to cut off the excess here. It's just easier to sew so you can just match up the edges. So when you're cutting off the excess, you're going to measure from the sewn line, the stitch line. Because when you sew it together, you want to sew under this. You want to use a zipper foot and you want to sew under this so that it matches exactly. So what you do here is you measure, make sure this is together, the edges together, and it's even. And you want to put the ruler along the sew line, which is 1/2 of an inch. You're going to mark that. It doesn't have to be exact, but as close as possible. And then you cut that out. So let me just put this here. Make sure the edges are together, and you cut a straight line. So now you have a 1/2 inch seam allowance here and a 1/2 inch seam allowance here, and then you're going to sew it together. So what I'm using here is a zipper foot. It has only one side to hold it down, and then this is what goes up against the edge. So I'm going to change the foot now. Okay, now that I have the zipper foot in and the needle is threaded, I'm going to match the seams. You have to put right sides together. So you match the seam here, and you match the seam. You match the seam here. Then you ease in everything else. Everything else should match. Now, if you're doing a tapered leg and the hem is narrower than the rest of the leg, you're going to have to trim along the inside where it doesn't have the top stitching, so that it matches up at the seam. But this one you can ease in fairly easily because that's a straight leg, not a tapered leg. Okay, so now everything is pinned. What you do is you line up the zipper foot, and you want to move this part up a little bit so you get as close to the top stitching as possible. So it's almost right at the edge. So you see what I'm saying? You have to move it as close to this as possible without sewing over this piece. So take it slowly so that you can try to fold this over a little bit. So as close to the edge as possible. This is about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Ooh. So just be careful about it because I just sewed over it. I can take that out later. Okay, here we go. Okay, so once that's done, you cut off all the excess. You're going to have to serge this edge so that it doesn't fray. But when you put it to the other side, this looks like it's on seam. So when you iron this, you still have the original edge, but you have a perfectly done length. So now you just have to serge that edge, and then you have the perfect jean. So now we have to serge the edges so that the fabric won't fray. It's just a serged edge right there, as close to the edge as possible. And then when you turn it, you have to press it, and this looks like the regular hem. So there you go. Have fun hemming your jeans. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like and subscribe buttons and share it with your friends. If you're not on our email list, you can sign up right now and download my free How to Measure Your Body toolkit. You'll also receive insight and tips every week that's only available to CMC insiders. This is Zahia from Cover Me Chic, where we make modest fashion look fabulous on you. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.